In local matters, Republican Corey Stewart won Virginia's Senate primary and will face incumbent Tim Kaine in November. He promised to run a vicious campaign against the former vice presidential nominee. Stewart is an immigration hardliner who is strongly committed to preserving Confederate monuments.
This morning, President Trump congratulated Stewart in a tweet, writing, "Now he runs against a total stiff, Tim Kaine, who is weak on crime and borders and wants to raise your taxes through the roof. Don't underestimate Corey, a major chance of winning." So with a recap of last night's primary race, we want to bring in Richmond Times-Dispatch politics reporter Patrick Wilson. He joins us now from Richmond, Virginia. So Patrick Stewart says he's going to run a vicious race against Tim Kaine. What do you suppose that's going to look like?
Well, Corey Stewart is the one Virginia politician who has really modeled himself after Donald Trump, and very likely, according to Corey, was Trump before Trump was Trump. He likes to say things that are intentionally controversial in order to generate a lot of attention in the media and on social media. One of the things that Corey Stewart, one of his lines of attack on Tim Kaine is about Tim Kaine's youngest son, Woody, who was arrested at a protest in Minneapolis last year and faced some minor charges after he scuffled with the police who were arresting liberal protesters at a pro-Trump rally. Corey Stewart will, on the campaign trail and in speeches, say that Tim Kaine's son is a member of Antifa, which is the short for anti-fascist, the left-wing groups that show up at protests to protest neo-Nazis and Klansmen. So just like Trump had rewritten a lot of the rules of politics, Corey Stewart is taking that in Virginia, and in one example, going after an incumbent senator's youngest son who doesn't live here, and that's part of how Corey operates. The interesting thing, though, is that while Corey Stewart pledges to run a vicious and ruthless campaign, he knows that the Democrats are actually going to do that to him, although they don't use those words. Those are words he uses. Corey Stewart just last week came under attack by the Republican primary challenger that he beat, Nick Freitas, who said that basically Corey was a hate monger who had made bad judgment in his associations in the past with people who were white nationalists or had ties to white nationalism. And Freitas was making the argument that if Republicans pick Corey Stewart, not only will he lose to Tim Kaine in November, but he'll bring down potentially several U.S. Republican House candidates with him. Corey, it was a pretty close election. Corey Stewart edged out Nick Freitas in the end to become the nominee. And so the Republican Party in Virginia is in a position now where they, elected officials will have to decide, do they want to attach themselves to Corey Stewart or do they want to keep their distance from him?
That's the question, Patrick, because when Mr. Stewart said that the days of a kindler and gentler GOP were over, I'm sure there were a lot of members of the Republican Party in Virginia who were worried about that, because we've gone from a place where we heard Republicans saying that the Republican Party was going to embrace compassionate conservatism to where we are today with Mr. Stewart saying that there's no more sort of free lunches in a way. And I just wonder, how alarming is this for other members of the GOP in Virginia? And how do they expect to run, given what we've seen, not just in Virginia, but what we saw in South Carolina with Mark Sanford? If you go against the president, you stand a chance of losing.
That's a very valid question, an important question that's going to be explored starting now as this fall campaign. We're a ways off from fall, but these campaigns run 24/7. The former lieutenant governor of Virginia, one of the former lieutenant governors, Republican Bill Bolling, on social media last night expressed just dismay that the party would nominate Corey Stewart as its candidate. And there are a lot of Republicans in Virginia that are upset by this. I think there may be some Republicans that end up either not voting or going with Tim Kaine. The Chamber of Commerce, groups like that are going to be with Senator Tim Kaine. But what Corey Stewart's argument is that one of his big issues is protection of Confederate monuments. Last year when he was running for governor, he made a video on Facebook where he sipped from a Robert E. Lee coffee mug, and he had a smirk on his face, and he said, "This, I like to sit back with some coffee and drink from my favorite mug," or something like that. And it's got a Confederate flag, or in General Lee. Stewart really believes that there's this electorate in Virginia that can be brought out to win an election, but you just have to appeal on an issue like that, on combating illegal immigration, and essentially on being 100% pro-Trump on everything that Trump does: tax cuts, foreign affairs. Corey Stewart is going to be right in line with the president, and as you all noted here earlier, the president has tweeted an endorsement and approval of Corey Stewart. So this made me wonder, boy, as this fall campaign commences, are we going to have some rallies with President Trump in Virginia and Corey Stewart? But, I think there's a lot of mindset that electorate doesn't exist in Virginia. The Northern Virginia suburbs are strongly Democratic. They're making this a blue state right now. Governor, Ralph Northam beat Ed Gillespie by 9 points last year in the governor's race. Democrats picked up 15 seats in the state House of Representatives, or state House of Delegates, which nobody expected and anticipated. And so, Corey Stewart will get his chance to prove his argument and prove whether or not it works.
So meanwhile, Patrick, let's talk about the Democrats. Democratic voters nominated a woman in every race where there was a woman running in the primary. So yesterday, so which of the races that are you really following? Which of these women do you think are real contenders? Female candidates did very well yesterday on the primary ballots. Mainly on the Democratic side, which is where most of the races were in Virginia. One of the key races that's being watched is in the Northern Virginia area. Incumbent Congresswoman Barbara Comstock is facing Democratic challenger who won yesterday, State Senator Jennifer Wexton from Loudoun County. This is in an area where there's a lot of anti-Trump sentiment. Barbara Comstock is somewhat of a moderate Republican who has really distanced herself from President Trump. She has to do that with the district that she's in. So there's going to be a huge Democratic push to try to unseat and flip this district. This is the 10th congressional district of Virginia. Another one of the big ones being watched is the 7th district, where Republican Congressman Dave Bratt is going to face Abigail Spanberger on the ballot in November. She is a former CIA officer who won her primary yesterday against Dan Ward and actually just clobbered him. She got more votes than any primary candidate on the ballot in any of the races in Virginia. And Dave Bratt is certainly a skilled and aggressive politician and congressman who, has a district that still leans to the red side. But the Democrats are going to make a huge push here to try to unseat Congressman Dave Bratt and flip that with Abigail Spanberger as their nominee. All right, Patrick Wilson, thank you for bringing us up to speed about what's going on in Virginia.